Well, there is rising Afro-optimism among the continent's youth. That's according to the Ichikowitz Family Foundation's 2020 African Youth Survey. There's the proof for you. Even brought a fancy book for us to look at. It found there's a strong sense of individual responsibility and confidence in a shared African identity. Well, Africa's youth believe they can solve problems collaboratively and are hopeful of fighting corruption, achieving peace, and improving their own personal lives as well. Let's unpack the issue and congratulate Reuben Ichikowitz from the foundation joining us. And the reason I say congratulations, not just a beautiful book, easy to read, the numbers behind this, Reuben, are backing what you say. Take me through your research. Congratulations on this.
Thank you. This survey is unprecedented. We set out to try and understand from a quantitative point of view what the mood, the perceptions, the pulse was of youth across the continent, and the data just didn't exist. So we set out together with our research partners, PSB, a transatlantic research firm, we set out to poll 4,200 youth across 14 countries in Africa. It took us a substantial amount of time to conduct those face-to-face interviews.
I'm glad you raised that, Reuben. The reason is often when you hear these research papers come out and research like this done, they'll take a small sample rate of 1,000 people across the various demographics. But if you never mind the 4,200 in-depth face-to-face interviews, Congo, Brazzaville, Ethiopia, Gabon, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Mali, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, and I can carry on with this, can't I? You've really expanded who you're talking to, not just speaking to people in South Africa about their experiences outside. You've gone there.
And that's part of the uniqueness of this, because we've never been able to understand these demographics side by side as well. There have been journalists, researchers that go deep into specific segments of the community, and we were really excited to pull that all together to see that Africans share so much but also differ so much across the different vectors.
Obviously, if we're talking about Afro-optimism, I'm going to imagine that there's Afro-skepticism involved in this somewhere, Reuben. So I'm going to ask those at home to take a quick sip of coffee. There's a lot of numbers coming your way, so if you are tired of work all week, I'm about to blow your brain, there they are behind us. So just take us through your key findings. Let's start at the top with the stable governments over democracy, and I thought that was fascinating.
So I agree, and this number is actually split. 48% choose stable governments and 48% choose democracy as well.
And why would they be different?
And when we drilled into this, we started to look at the specific histories of those countries and how they value strong leadership, they value decisive policy making, where there's been extreme trauma. One of the examples here is Rwanda. Rwanda came out as one of the most positive countries in the survey, and they opted that the majority there chose stable governments because they see the power of a strong political sector.
And then if you go from the government scale of involvement for the youth, they then start getting involved in their communities as well. And that's seemingly, from what the research I've read that was sent to me, and thank you for that, it's beyond government. The youth are realizing, Reuben, correct me if I'm wrong, and that stat speaks to it, that they can affect change in their own communities, regardless of what's happening around them. They can change what's happening at home.
So the survey picked up that communities are really the nucleus of African youth. And it was interesting to see the split between urban and rural, and how in urban areas youth still feel that sense of needing to create the community, and how they're inspired by a snowballing effect, but realizing that communities is where to start. Although it's interesting that when asked about their identity, they identify themselves as Pan-African and not based specifically as to which community they come from or their race or their tribe.
And I thought this was fascinating just because of what the UN refers to as a basic human right. Years ago, you and I would have had a discussion about this as we continue to look at the numbers. The third line for you, 79% believe Wi-Fi access should be a human right. 10 years ago, you and I would have still been in school, obviously, but we would have said right to information, right to education was a basic human right. Now we have Wi-Fi.
Now we have Wi-Fi, and we did a whole lot of polling around communications and media and to understand how youth are engaging through Wi-Fi. So they see Wi-Fi as the conduit, as the infrastructure, I suppose, towards the internet. A lot of them, and your second stat is, I'm going to preempt ourselves here, a lot of them interact with the outside world through the internet. 79% of youth that we polled owned smartphones, for example. They spend 3 to 4 hours a day on smartphones, regardless of their demographic. And Wi-Fi is a way that they feel that they are part of the community within that which they live and the Pan-African one too.
And this brings us to that last slide, and I'm sure we'll be able to show you on screen. In case you can't see it at home, 67% say fake news is impacting their ability. So here you've got this conundrum, don't you? You've got this access to Wi-Fi, you've got their smartphones, you've got access to information. The bottom of the screen, they think fake news is going to ruin it for them.
So what I think is positive about this is that they're identifying the challenge of fake news, because the real concern is when you fed this information not knowing that it's misinformation. So at least the awareness is there. I think that we as a media fraternity, or as the knowledge leaders around the continent, need to be very aware of the youth's demands and requirements for understanding what's behind the facts. The survey is a great example of that.
Just before I say goodbye to you, you and I can talk about this all day, but I do want to ask you this, Reuben. Explain this to me, and those at home are going to perhaps fall off their chair. When I say Donald Trump, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg, knowing the media fora around them, if you're telling me they're going to be the greatest, have the greatest impact over the next 5 years, I'm worried.
I tend to agree with you and disagree with you. I think that what's interesting is youth still see the West as being influences in Africa. That is worrying. I think that if we look at what they also say about technology, 65% of youth see the 21st century as the African century, and a large majority of them within that see technology as the enabler. So those three people that you mentioned all have links to what they're doing is building technology that the youth see as very powerful for entrepreneurship, very powerful in the political sense as well, and quite exciting overall.
Reuben, thank you so much for coming in. I'm hoping that people are going to go and look for your book. Here's that book again for you. You can see it behind me on screen. The Rise of Afro-optimism, African Youth Survey 2020. If you want more information, I'm just going to give you their website, www.ichikowitzfoundation.com. That is Reuben Ichikowitz joining us here on ENCA. Thank you for coming in to speak to us this morning.